Alrighty, welcome to what I hope is a video on LinkedIn. I haven't tried this before, so this is a new one for me. And I realized I've been doing a lot of work on people pleasers, but I haven't really focused on the LinkedIn crowd. And I figured I'd give that a go and let you guys know about what I've discovered about the world of people pleasing, and in particular for the LinkedIn crew, how it affects you in your career as an employee and even as an entrepreneur. So today's video is just going to be a brief one where I'm going to talk about what it means to be a people pleaser. Who are people pleasers and how do you know if you are one? I've been doing this work for a long time now, and I've come to the point where I've defined essentially 5 categories of people pleaser. And it depends if you're an introvert or an extrovert and how it manifests, whether it's inwards or outwards in its manifestation, as to what type you are. So today's video I just want to talk about the different types, and if you hear yourself in these types, you might realize that, hey, if you've been struggling in your career, or there's been a lot of stress, burnout, dissatisfaction, alienation from your peers, trouble with your bosses, people pleasing might be the direction you need to look in to solve those issues. So let's start with the extroverted types. There's 3 of them. And the first one is my one, which is the performer. So the performer is somebody who has social anxiety about seeking validation and approval. They're a people pleaser. And they get their sort of confidence from impressing other people, from getting compliments and recognition and achieving well and winning. So the performer puts on a show. They're a really hard worker, or at least they pretend to be. They're always trying to beat everybody. They're very ambitious. They like to speak up at the meeting and share their ideas. They can even be quite overly dominant with this. And they're basically putting on a show the whole time. They try to be more positive than they feel. They hide negative emotions. They're always trying to look good in other people's eyes and to make other people have, pleasant emotions. So you know the performer type if you're extroverted and if you're always seeking approval from your bosses and avoiding disapproval. You're agreeable. And you're also a show-off, right? So that's the performer type. The next type of extrovert is what I call the controller. And this is my dog's chasing butterflies. This is the type who tries to manipulate and influence everybody. This is the person who plays the game. They're political. They're also ambitious. They're often extroverted and can be quite socially, you might say, intelligent and skilled. But essentially they're constantly playing this game. They're working out the relationships and the alliances between people. And the main way you know that you're this type of person is when you change who you are depending on the audience. If you're a different person with your boss than you are with your colleagues, than you are with the janitor, than you are with your clients, than you are with your friends. If you're changing who you are to suit each of these people, then you're the manipulative controller. Okay. And the third type of extrovert is actually the one who looks least like a people pleaser, and that's the contrarian. So this is the person who always fights against and resists everything and tries to be the underdog, tries to be in the smaller group and not with the mainstream and not conforming. So they will actually sacrifice what they believe in just to make sure they're not part of the majority. They're the person who always argues against at the team meetings. They're the person who always throws a spanner in the works, the disagreeable person. But the person who's disagreeable in such a way as to actually get a kind of positive validation from it. They might be the most hated person in the office, but they like being the most hated person in the office. They like seeing themselves as the shit stirrer, as the person who mixes things up. When really all they do is just disagree with everything that they can use as a platform to show off. Right? So those are the extroverted types of people pleasers. Some of them are seeking approval, some of them are actually seeking disapproval, but what they're all seeking is recognition, validation, attention. Now there's 2 introverted types I've noticed as well. The first one, which is what I'd call the observer or the wallflower. Now this is the person that you never hear from. They don't speak up in the team meeting, they don't make waves, they hide in the background. They are perfectionist and they panic about doing the job right. They never disagree. They're not even strongly agreeing. They just try to fly under the radar and not get noticed in a negative way. So while the extroverts tend to seek approval, the introverts tend to avoid disapproval. Those are two slightly different strategies to achieve the same goal of not being disapproved of. So where the extrovert will try and get points, the introvert tries to avoid losing points. Yeah. So the observer, the wallflower, just stays quiet, sits in the background, never gets into any leadership positions or any risk-taking, and just kind of follows the group. And a similar in the final sort of version of types of people pleaser that I've identified is the inner critic. And this one actually spreads across almost all of the different types. But there's a specific type where the person who just lives, this introvert who just lives inside their own head, again a perfectionist, and they're just beating themselves up all the time. It doesn't matter how much approval you give them or recognition you give them. They've got that imposter syndrome. They never believe that they're good enough. They're always criticizing themselves heavily. They diminish any successes they have and justify their lack of skill or quality by emphasizing any failures or weaknesses. They're always over-dramatizing and catastrophizing any negative feedback they get or imagined negative feedback. They're constantly worried what other people think of them, and they're just locked up inside their head. Now on the surface they may look calm, but every day is just this revolving disaster as they just beat themselves to death. And again, it's all, the reason that this is a type of people pleaser is because it's all related to how much other people like them. Their confidence again is based on how much other people like them, but whereas say a performer bases that on the positive feedback they get, the inner critic bases it on imagined negative feedback. So you don't even need to give them feedback, they'll make it up and they'll think it's real. Like if you yawn when they're speaking during a team meeting, they'll assume you're bored. They won't ask you about it, they'll just come to that assumption and beat themselves up. So in my work, these are the 5 types of people pleasers that I've identified. And it's important to know that if you resonate with any of these, if you're a show-off, or you're a manipulator, or you're the guy who fights against everything, or you're one who hides in the background to try and not get noticed, or the one who's constantly beating themselves up for everything, the effect that this has on your career is disastrous. Now, if you're an extroverted type, you probably can make it up into like middle management, but you won't get much further because you're too fraudulent. Okay, you're either too agreeable or too disagreeable or too manipulative. Eventually you get to a certain level where people can see through the act and they don't trust you. And of course, if you're the more introverted type, you kind of won't get anywhere because you won't be assertive and you won't take risks. And even if this stuff works for you, you won't enjoy it. You'll just be anxious all the time. Sunday will be your nightmare as Monday approaches. You're constantly worried, constantly scheming, constantly strategizing. The cogs are turning all the time. You'll have a million stories in your head why you can't be yourself at the office. You know, you'll have all these things about how you got to be professional and now you got to be everything that everybody else wants you to be. And it's just a complete story that you've made up inside your head, but you believe it fully, don't you? And because you believe it, the enjoyment you could be having in your work is destroyed, as a massive portion of your energy goes into trying to get your confidence from an external source, which is namely other people. So I want to throw that out there, mostly to normalize it. You are surrounded by people pleasers. They're all pretending not to be. Some of them are very good actors. Often the most confident, externally confident looking people are the ones worst afflicted with this. They're just extroverted. And the quiet person who looks like they got their shit together is dying on the inside. You know, you're really surrounded by people. They're probably the majority rather than the minority. And it's normal. We've all got this. And it's not a life sentence. If you want to work on this stuff, let me know. Comment below or send me a message. I can send you some resources to help you start breaking out of this, to be more authentic in the workplace without having to risk your career, so that you can go into work and you don't have to pretend and you don't have to put effort in. You can just be you and actually enjoy yourself. Hope that helps. I'll catch you all next time.